Welcome back to Introduction to World Religion. This is Lesson 9, the Shramana Buddhists. If you've not done the reading yet for this lesson, which is from Fenton and Pfizer, please pause the video and go review the material. If you've done the reading, then let's move forward with the lesson. By reviewing the story of the Buddha, we're able to learn more about Buddhism itself. Now, there are variations of this story throughout the Buddhist world, and the earliest records of these stories are hundreds of years after the Buddha died. Nonetheless, they provide a glimpse into Buddhist values and themes. According to legend, around the 5th century BCE, the king of the Sakya clan, which is now in modern-day Nepal, King Suddhodana, had a new son, the prince Siddhartha Gautama, and when he was born, he invited many people to the birth. Two people came who could proclaim omens and good tidings, and when they inspected the child, they noted the signals and the signs and told the king that his son, Siddhartha, was destined to become either a world conqueror or a world renouncer. Now, as a king, which one of these paths do you think Suddhodana wanted his son to follow? Yes, the world conqueror. So in order to ensure this, the king removed anything from the palace that might entice his young son to choose a path of renouncing. He made sure that anyone who was sick could not enter the palace, that only the nicest foods and drinks were present, and that anyone who ever began to show old age was not permitted into the palace. So throughout his young life, Siddhartha was surrounded by joy, luxury, and pleasure. After 30 years of age, Siddhartha was getting close to becoming a father. His wife Yasodhara was pregnant with his new son. And out of restlessness, he turned to his charioteer, Channa, and asked him to take him outside the palace. Channa, being a dutiful charioteer and driver, took Siddhartha out. When they first went out, they saw the first of the 4 sights. The first sight was a person who looked wrinkled all over. And Siddhartha asked Channa to stop and said, "What is wrong with that man, Channa? Why is he all wrinkly? Why does his skin look rough?" And Channa said, "Oh, Siddhartha, this person's old. We all get old. This is a point of life. Everyone ages." And because for 30 years Siddhartha had never thought or contemplated this, it was a great shock to him, and he returned to the palace. The next day, he turns to Channa and says, "Please take me out again," and Channa complies. This time, Siddhartha sees a person who has these discolorations and is hacking and coughing. He asks Channa to stop and points at him and says, "Channa, what's wrong with that person? Why does this person look discolored in the face? Why is he bent over and making a coughing noise?" And Channa said, "Oh, Siddhartha, that person is sick. Sickness is a part of life. We all get sick. It's one of the unpleasant things we have to deal with." And once again, Siddhartha's world is just turned upside down, and he asks to go back to the palace. Nonetheless, the 3rd day, Channa is asked once more by the young prince to take him out. And so they do. And this time, Siddhartha asks Channa to stop when he sees a man being carried. And the man is horizontal, not moving at all. And Channa says, "Channa, what's wrong with this person? Why are they carrying him? Why is he laying down?" And Channa said, "Oh, Siddhartha, oh, young prince, this person is dead. Death is a part of life. We will all die in the end." Now imagine, again, if you think about this, how much fear we have of dying, and that Siddhartha, up until the age of 30, had never considered this. This, once again, turned his world inside out. And so he went back to the palace. But on the 4th day, he yet again went to Channa and asked to take him out. And this time, he saw a renunciant, And he asked who that was, and Channa told him this was a man, O Siddhartha, who was renouncing the worldly pleasures in order to get beyond this world and beyond suffering. Siddhartha returns to the palace, but is frustrated. His son is born. He names the son Rahula, which literally means tethered, and decides to leave, to go out, figure out how to escape the suffering. He first goes with some ascetics who decide to deny pleasures and food as much as they can. At one point, it's remembered that Siddhartha is so thin that he can see through his ribs. But he finds that he's no closer to understanding the troubles of suffering than he was before. So he abandons these ascetics, abandons the strict desire to avoid food, and instead goes off on his own. And it's said that he gets underneath a tree. We know now because of archaeology that it's either a peepal tree or a banyan tree, and meditates. And upon meditation, comes to have a new realization of what should be, and comes out of it and begins to profess this new path, which we now call Buddhism. There are several themes and values we can discern from listening to this narrative. The first of these is the theme of suffering, or what the Buddhists call dukkha. Siddhartha was removed from any instances of suffering early on, but no matter how hard his father tried, he could not prevent his son from witnessing suffering. And when Siddhartha had those foresights and saw that suffering, this transformed his world. Suffering is a main focus in Buddhist doctrine, in the sense of trying to get beyond or over it. Another thing we see is the avoidance of extremes. During the time of the Buddha, there were the Lokayatas, who rejoiced in forms of pleasure and hedonism and believed the carpe diem adage of live life to the fullest. Siddhartha, in his palace pleasures, was unsatisfied with such a direction. And likewise, when he went to the other extreme with the ascetics, which more matched the Ajivakas and in some ways the Jains of that day and age, that also did not satisfy Siddhartha. We can note here how very early on here in the 5th century BCE that we're seeing the beginnings of what is now common political rhetoric, the arguing of a middle path. So in today's modern politics, politicians are always trying to present themselves as being in the middle. And here this becomes the calling card for Buddhists, saying that Siddhartha represents the middle path. If you have not noticed, the story I gave of Siddhartha was very male-driven and male-focused. I talked about his father, King Suddhodana, but I didn't mention his mother, Queen Mahamaya, who actually passed away during childbirth, or his foster mother, his aunt. And don't forget that Siddhartha left his wife, Yasodhara, to pursue a path of asceticism. These themes are present throughout the Buddhist world. And the story itself reflects the ways in which Siddhartha gets the name Buddha, which means the awakened one. The Buddhist world is so diverse that it's very difficult to identify common traits and patterns. In this way also, if you wish to learn more about Buddhism or Hinduism, the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies offers courses solely on just Hindu traditions and Buddhism. But for right now, let's go into the ways of trying to bring these very diversified Buddhist traditions together. What would hold them together? I call this the Buddhist 1 through 5. 1 is that every single Buddhist tradition that I'm aware of agrees that the founder is the Buddha. This is distinct from, say, Hindus, who might acknowledge the Buddha, but say the Buddha is an avatar of Vishnu. 2 would be two truths. Buddhists believe that the world as we know it, you can understand through two different ways of truths. One is the conventional truths, that which we make sense of in this world, but then there is ultimate truth. We can take as an analogy the movie The Matrix, in which when Neo's in the Matrix, the ways of getting around the Matrix is a conventional truth path, but the ultimate truth is outside the Matrix. 3 would be the Tripitaka. Tripitaka being the 3 baskets. Buddhists refer to these as baskets because they're forms of collections of scriptures, types of scriptures that have been organized into 3 different categories. They're called the Vinaya, which is the scriptures having to do with the monastics. The Abhidharma, which literally means the higher sciences. And this is where you get scriptures that have to do with medicine and law, astrology and philosophy. And then last is the sutras. These are the narratives and parables, similar to what you might find in the Christian Bible with the Gospels. There's also the 3 jewels in Buddhism. Now, if you recall, in Jainism, there were the 3 jewels. But these jewels are different in Buddhism. The 3 jewels are the Buddha, and they go Buddham Saranam Gacchami. They take refuge in the Buddha. Dharma, which means here doctrine or law, and Buddhists will say Dharmam Saranam Gacchami, taking refuge in the Dharma, the doctrine. And last, the Sangha, the community. Sangam Saranam Gacchami, taking refuge in the community, often meaning the monastic community. So these are the 3 jewels. 4 would be the Noble Truths. This is a very important philosophical point for Buddhists, in that, and you can parallel this a lot with going to see a doctor. I mean, you're hoping when you visit the doctor can say, you're suffering. And they can note that. And this is the first noble truth in Buddhism, that life is suffering, dukkha. By saying that life is suffering, Buddhists are not trying to be pessimistic and be an Eeyore and say, oh my, life is suffering. No. What they're saying is that life is filled with joys, pleasures, and sadness and pain. You can only eat so much until you get a stomach ache. You always have pains. You'll always be aging and engaging in different things and being dissatisfied in certain things. And so this is a way of life. So that's their first noble truth. The second, when you're hoping at the doctor's office, the doctor can go, I can tell you why. What is the cause of that suffering? Buddhists argue the cause of suffering are what they say are 3 poisons. That would be ignorance, hatred, and attachment. Now, after the doctor has been able to identify the cause of your suffering, you're hoping that the doctor can say there's a way to remedy the situation. And that's the third noble truth, the cessation from suffering. And last but not least, then the doctor would give you a prescription, what to do to alleviate your suffering. And this would be the path to cessation, otherwise known as the Eightfold Path, which is correct view, correct thought, correct speech, correct action, correct livelihood, correct effort, correct concentration, and correct mindfulness. Last but not least, because we're doing Buddhists 1 through 5, is the 5 moral precepts. These are the precepts or the moral guidelines that Buddhists take on in their day-to-day lives. The 5 are the avoidance or no harm or injury, no stealing, no lying, no taking intoxicants that cloud the mind, and no sexual misconduct. In addition to the 1 through 5, there are also philosophical tenets that form the foundation for Buddhist traditions. The first of these is called dependent origination. This argument is that everything depends on something else to exist. We could take, for example, a plant. For a seed to grow, what does it need? It needs sunlight, water, good soil. And if you cut any of these out, what happens to the plant? It dies. So the plant is dependent on these other things to exist. Likewise, good soil is dependent upon worms. For sunlight, depends upon the clouds. Water depends upon moisture in the air. Buddhists maintain everything is dependent on something else. In connection to this is the argument they make that everything is impermanent. By this they mean that every single thing that exists in the world is a process that is changing and breaking down. Buddhists agree that there's karma. And in fact, they argue that intention is more important than the action when it comes to understanding karma and its effects for rebirths. But they distinguish themselves from the early Vedic people's beliefs and the Hindus as well as the Jains by maintaining that there is no permanent self or soul. There is no jiva. There is no atman. Instead, the Buddhists argue there is an-atman, no soul, no self. And by this again they mean that the self is more a process than it is a thing, and it's not permanent. From what we know of science right now, it corroborates this very argument. The cells in our bodies are constantly breaking down, and new ones are forming. Even our memories, the minute we pull them from our memory banks to the present consciousness, they change. So nothing that we know about right now is permanent. Everything is changing. Everything is in a process. The third concept is the concept of emptiness. Buddhists will argue that because nothing exists independently and everything is impermanent, it's empty of any true existence. Take, for instance, the ocean and looking at these ripples. The ripples might look like they're distinct, but can you grab a ripple? Can you hold on to it? In fact, no. A ripple is a process. So often, according to Buddhists, we mistake processes for things. A wave is simply part of a process of the entire ocean or lake or sea. It's dependent on these other things to exist. We cannot abstract it and take it away from it. It's empty of any true existence. Now that we've covered some of the basic philosophical views and beliefs, let's turn to the distinctions in doctrine. Now, Buddhist traditions can be broken into three large doctrinal camps. Theravada, which is the path of the elders, Mahayana, which is the great vehicle, and Vajrayana, which is often referred to as the diamond vehicle. Sometimes scholars will say that Vajrayana is a subset of Mahayana. But beyond these doctrinal distinctions, there's so much more diversity per the locality. As I mentioned, Theravada Buddhism means the path of the elders. And these practitioners argue that their tradition dates back to around the 3rd century BCE and is the oldest of the surviving lineages. Hence, they retain a similar praxis, a similar set of practices to what is believed to be originally taking place during the time of the Buddha. They believe that there are arhats, worthy ones, that people get to after many rebirths. It goes through a process in which you live a very good life, and if you're lucky, you can enter what they call the state of a stream enterer. But then after several other rebirths, then you can finally get to the point of becoming an arhat and becoming awakened. So it takes many lifetimes for this to happen. Hence, because of this, the vast majority of Buddhists under Theravada Buddhism believe that the most important thing to do right now is to build your merit so that you have a better rebirth, because it's so difficult to get to that point of becoming awakened. To make this merit, laity, followers, will do things for the monks. Often they'll give food to the monks in the form of alms. And there's a very unique relationship we see between the laity, the followers, and the monastics, in that they're both relying on each other. The followers are relying on the monks to be living pious lives, so that by supporting them, the laity are gaining merit for helping these very selfless people out. And the monks are relying upon food and money so that they can direct their attention to the supramundane, the otherworldly endeavors and meditation, and not having to handle money or work. We can locate many Theravada Buddhist traditions within South and Southeast Asia. It was practiced in early India, it currently is in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Mahayana is another doctrinal group within Buddhism. It's called the Great Vehicle, and it grew out of early Buddhism as a form of reformation. It's believed the earliest forms of Mahayana can be found in the 1st century BCE. The largest and most popular forms of Mahayana that we can find today are Chan and Pure Land. Now, Chinese call this Chan. It comes from the Sanskrit term dhyana, to meditate. When Chan moved to Korea, it became Sum, and when it moved to Japan, it became Zen. Mahayana Buddhism differs from Theravada Buddhism with regard to the concept of a bodhisattva. For Mahayana practitioners, they believe it's important to, once you become awakened, come back to this life and help others become awakened. These are called bodhisattvas, those committed to the path of not only helping to attain awakening for themselves, but for all other sentient beings. In Mahayana Buddhism, there's the argument that you need 2 wings to lift off, to become awakened. One wing is compassion, the other wisdom. With compassion and no wisdom, you can become an enabler, allowing people to do things even though it's not the best for them, because you're trying to be compassionate. If you're wise but not compassionate, you can be brutal in your administering of justice. So both of these are needed to balance out. Practitioners of Mahayana have often called the Theravada followers Hinayana. Hinayana is a derogatory term that means basically the debased, the vile, the malfunctioning vehicle, which is never a title that anyone would want to self-identify as. They accuse Theravada practitioners for being selfish since they're not pledging the Bodhisattva vow. That being said, Theravada practitioners are interested in gaining merit, and merit is made through generosity to monks and other people. So it's a far cry to call them selfish. Mahayana and Vajrayana are also quite diffused throughout Asia. For Mahayana, you can find different practices in South, Central, and East Asia, particularly in China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Japan, and Korea. For Vajrayana, you can find it in the same regions, particularly in Tibet, Mongolia, Russia, Bhutan, Nepal, and the Japanese tradition called Shingon. The Vajrayana Buddhist tradition is often translated as the diamond or thunderbolt vehicle because of how strong and fast it is. It's an offshoot from Mahayana, and recall that I mentioned that some scholars list Vajrayana as a sub-tradition under Mahayana, while others argue it's its own distinctive category. The most popular traditions associated with Vajrayana would be Tibetan Buddhism, some parts of Japanese Buddhism, and early Indian Buddhism. Vajrayana differs from Theravada and Mahayana in 3 particular ways. One is the guru-disciple relationship. By this I mean that in order to get access to the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, a disciple needs to find a guru, a teacher, who has the key to unlock these 3 jewels. That's the only way you can get access. So it's very important to find a good guru who has a strong lineage that can provide the unlocking of secrets for you. This gets to the second theme, that of esotericism, the fact that it's very difficult, complex, or cryptic to understand. You need a guru to explain things. In line with this also is the association with Tantra. Tantra is found in Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism. And it's usually an understanding that it's a countercultural act, the opposite of what's normally done, untraditional in many ways. But the third, I think, and most interesting difference here is how expedient Vajrayana Buddhism is. Remember, this is the thunderbolt, very fast, so you can become awakened very quickly in one lifetime. But beyond this, there's ways of supercharging practices. Within Theravada Mahayana Buddhism, you recite mantras again and again to gain merit. In Tibetan Buddhism, they wrote these mantras on what's called prayer wheels. That's what we see in the image here on the right. And instead of reciting the mantra again and again, you turn the wheel, one revolution, which is equal to saying it once. But this way, you can say that mantra hundreds of times in a matter of seconds by spinning the wheel. Hence, the Diamond Thunderbolt vehicle. To continue with this theme on Tibetan Buddhism, we can look at a tanka, which has a great depiction of the Buddhist world and how they see things. Now here on the left, we see the Buddha in top right. Notice he's outside of everything. He's escaped the cycle of suffering. And here's Lord Yama. Yama, just as in Zoroastrianism, is the first human to have died and is lord over death. Within his grasp, we see the 6 realms of existence. These are going to be the heavens, the demi-heavens where the titans are, the human realm, the animal realm, the ghost realm, and the hells. There's quite a few hells and heavens in Buddhism. In the middle, what makes the suffering and rebirths go around and around and continue are those 3 poisons we talked about in the Four Noble Truths: ignorance, hatred, and attachment. And on the outer level is the 12 dependent links of existence, a way of describing and explaining how the self is dependent on other things to exist. And notice that here, the self, the poisons, the 6 realms in which the gods and the ghosts are in there, are all under the control of Yama, because they all die and get reborn, just like in Jainism. And the only one outside of this wheel of samsara, of rebirths again and again, is the Buddha. A common confusion in the United States is thinking that South Asian religious practices, that people like to be reborn. Within Buddhism and Jainism and Hinduism, the desire is to stop being reborn, to awaken, to get out of the cycle. It just so happens, though, in some traditions, people think they can't do this, so they might as well have a better rebirth and gain some merit for that time. To come back to the first point we made at the beginning of this lesson, I want to underscore the fact that there is no monolithic Buddhism. Buddhism is a theoretical construct that becomes tradition through the imputation of culture. That theoretical construct is what we talked about, those Buddhists 1 through 5 and those philosophical tenets. But these are abstract. You can never find them alone. They're always melded with a culture and made different and distinctive. There's never been a Buddhism without culture. Let's take a look at this example here with the images to show the diversity and the uniformity throughout Buddhist traditions. On the left is Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. You see the many hands because Avalokiteshvara is, as the embodiment of compassion, helping so many people out with all those different hands. In the center is the 14th Dalai Lama. Tibetans believe the 14th Dalai Lama is an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion. And on the far right is, within Chinese Buddhism, a depiction of the embodiment of compassion in what they call Guan Yin. All 3 are embodiments of compassion. The left, the Bodhisattva, was found in many other Buddhist traditions. They believe that the Bodhisattva is there watches over us. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's the Dalai Lama, a human coming back to help others. And in Chinese Buddhism, it's a female Guan Yin. So you have the uniformity in all believing that there's a bodhisattva of compassion. Differences in how that is manifested, described, and depicted. This concludes our lesson on the Shramana Buddhists. If you've not done so yet, please make sure you write 2 questions or comments based upon the Fenton and Pfizer readings and respond to at least 2 of your colleagues' questions and comments. Next, we'll be covering Confucianism, and I look forward to talking to you about that then. Take care.